Good afternoon, and welcome to a special episode of عنان podcast, shot here live during the Miss Global Forum 2024. I'm incredibly honored to introduce my guest, my second guest for the day, Steve Wazniak. Steve does not need an introduction, but I will start off by saying he is someone that grew up with a passion for electronics and computers. And his father, who was an engineer, encouraged his curiosity and taught him about technology from a young age. We will spend this episode getting to know the man behind the name and getting to know the different aspects that make him who he is. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you mentioned my dad.
Yes, that's how I like to start things.
Yes,
right
he was able to teach
beginning.
me because he was an engineer, but also give me a lot of good guidance about ways to think in life without putting his values on me.
Nice.
And when I had my own children, I said, I'm not going to decide what they should study, how much they should study, what university they should go to. Let them find out for themselves and enjoy life themselves. It's much more part of the fun that you got to have in life.
So the curiosity that he sparked in you is something that you continued to...
Oh, I don't think he sparked. I think curiosity, we're all born with it.
Nice.
But he helped it grow. A lot of times you go to teachers or parents, don't do that, only study this, only do that. And they start putting restrictions on you. Don't open that drawer. It's got to be closed. And my parents were not like that at all. For example, my first year of college, I could have gone to a place like MIT easy. And I flew out of California and visited a college, and it snowed. Mm-hmm. I had never been in snow in my life, and my heart wanted to go there. That was the only college I would apply to, and my parents let me.
Just because of the snow?
Just because I wanted to. Follow your heart. They could only afford out-of-state tuition for 1 year, but no, it was an incredible experience in my life. But many things, pretty much, I got to decide where I was going in life, and through, especially outside of school projects, I did all of my learning about electronics first and then computers second. And it was very, very advanced, but I just did it all alone in my room because I was shy. I didn't do things, they weren't in the school. There were no computers, there were no books on how you make a computer, no magazines on computers. I just sort of understood them. I taught myself from a little journal I'd find here and a manual I'd find there.
At what age is this?
This is mostly around 10, 11 years old.
10, 11 years old.
Maybe 12.
So how did you get to be exposed to these kinds of books? And is it through your father being an engineer, or
Yes.
is it through just curiosity and you going after them?
My father was an engineer in the analog days. So
Okay.
I was an analog person who learned how all the formulas, mathematical formulas of electrons flowing through substances and certain kinds of materials could make radios and TVs. And I had a ham radio license. You had to study a lot of the academics and the rules and the regulations and the bands frequencies. So I had that in 10 years old.
That's
And,
incredible.
Yeah, well, that was good. But pretty much every city you went to might have a young ham radio operator like me. They were around.
So it wasn't like it was completely...
possible, but look at my transmitter. You didn't just go out and buy, a little thing you can hold in your hand like today. No. I had to have 100 parts and soldered them together following instructions. My father didn't help at all, and built this huge transmitter. And then I built a huge receiver that could receive the signals and put an antenna on the roof. And then I'd go out there with a Morse code key and da-da-da-da-da. So I was one of these people that was solidly into electronics. And then I discovered, by accident, a journal in the hall closet.
Okay.
My father worked as an engineer at Lockheed during the space race, and it discussed computers and ones and zeros and how you add them, and I practiced on paper. And then it discussed logic that make decisions like light switches, up is on, down is off, and how you can combine a lot of these little logic elements on paper. They had symbols. You could combine them and make something that even adds numbers, getting closer to computers, intelligence, or whatever.
Did you know what you were working on? Did you have a visualization of
No.
what this could ultimately mean?
No, not at all. I thought, oh my gosh, I've discovered something that they don't do in school, that
I
my
just wanna
friends,
explore.
none of my friends know. I've discovered something that's personal to me, and I was so shy I couldn't talk to other people, really. And so I just did it on my own, and I said, this is going to be my passion for life. It's like I discovered crossword puzzles, or words or another language. I said, this is going to be what I love doing for life. And I looked for every little hint I could find. How do they build a computer? How do you make one out of some of this knowledge? And eventually I got further and further along on that. And then I could, easily design the processor of a computer in high school. We didn't have any computers then. There were no books on it in bookstores.
So was it all hypothetical in that sense?
It was hypothetical. I just loved knowing this kind of knowledge. What you're good at, you value, and so I gave it value. But it wasn't. I didn't think coming out of high school, even though I could design a computer and give me a description of a computer, a new mini computer, and I could design it in 2 days. I didn't think that computer design was a job. Okay. I didn't think you'd ever work as an engineer. I knew I'd be an engineer, but I thought it was going to be the old analog mathematical calculus style engineer that I was very good at. I could have been a television engineer. And that was an engineer, but this digital stuff was just done in research, places called research, and places called the military.
Yeah.
I don't know.
NASA.
but I kind of figured out eventually, oh yes, I could actually design computers some days of life. But the thing is, first thing you do out of college, you're young, the first thing is you need money to pay for an apartment. You'll take a job doing anything. It doesn't have to be designing computers, but you're young. When you're young, you have so much free time if you don't waste it and go out partying all the time. And I worked on my own little designs, never thinking it was going to actually turn into a company or an industry or any relevance. I just wanted to impress myself and engineers around me. And I was an engineer without a college degree, designing the hottest products of the time. No computers yet. No, that hadn't come.
I don't think I can even visualize what that would look like to kind of be, the father of a brand new industry, basically, that still was in its very infant stages.
But it was so accidental. I told my father in high school, because I had the skill to design a computer on paper. It took a lot of drawing for 2 days to make the chips that would add up to a computer. And I told my dad, I'm going to own a computer, a 4K Data General Nova computer. I had a poster of it on my wall in my bedroom. And he said, it costs as much as a house. So I said, I'll live in an apartment. I'm going to own a computer no matter what it takes in life.
Nice.
Now, the fact is, I was going to eventually design the computers that changed the world. I was going to design them when it came. And I was way ahead of the other people doing it. And the reason is they were trying to build computers the way I had built 5 years before.
Wow.
So I was that far past. And so I was going to build that computer. I didn't do it to start an industry or a company or to make money.
It was just a personal passion.
It was partly a personal passion, but I wanted other engineers to have a chance to see what I had designed on paper, my designs and my software, and say, whoa, and be impressed, because I knew I was way ahead.
At what age was this?
This one was by 20 to 25 years old, that range.
So if I can take you back for a minute, because you mentioned something. You said that you were very shy in front of people, right?
Very.
Yeah. So how did you have all this knowledge and all this curiosity and all this understanding that you started gaining, while at the same time not being able to be around too many people? How did you overcome this hurdle, and how did you make yourself known as someone who's well versed in the ones and zeros?
I had a few technical friends, and I eventually got a job working as an engineer. So I was around them and could sort of show off.
They took you out of your shell a little bit?
Yes, yeah. But eventually, when we started Apple, no, I was in the shell. I couldn't talk to people. And eventually, I started talking to people about chips and the signals and the interrupt signals and the timing, how many microseconds for this. Very technical. And then we moved up to some computer clubs started forming. And they started following rules of order, having the right things, order of running a meeting and what would be discussed. And then we got up, they were kind of technical. Then we finally got up to, real business audiences. Mm-hmm. So I got to go up such a smooth staircase. That's how it worked for me.
My understanding is that when you first started Apple, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you guys started Apple. Maybe let's start with that, and then I want to ask you a little bit about how open you were with the information as well.
Well, my reasons, technology could, help. There were things that people could do, solve problems that they could do if they could use a computer and write their own programs and that sort of stuff.
What did you visualize it solving?
Oh, even solving a puzzle, how to play a puzzle,
Nice.
how to connect the pieces
So it
on a
wasn't
weird...
as grand as we see it today. You
Well, anything you want,
visualized
or
it.
calculate the numbers that scientists had to use back then. They had tables and tables in books. You could calculate them, and a lot of things you could calculate. You could do more with a computer than without. Secondly, education was going to be improved because a student could be given a question, and their answer could be judged right or wrong immediately. And when you do reward and punishment type training, I forget the phrase right now. Reward and punishment should be immediate. Like if a dog does something bad on the floor, you don't hit it on the head 10 hours later.
Yeah.
It has to be immediate. And now the student was going to find out right away, and they were going to be a lot smarter and doing better in school. And also the geek like me that knew the insides of a computer was going to be very valuable in life. So that was the reason. Steve Jobs and I talked eventually. He saw my computer. He wasn't around when I developed this first computer. I was in a club and I was showing it off, and I gave out all my designs to everybody. I said, you could build them. We wanted to start a revolution to bring computers to people. And Steve Jobs came into town, and I took him to the club to show him. It's the opposite of a movie with Ashton Kutcher that shows Steve Jobs taking me to a club.
Okay.
What a bunch of...
Yeah.
I'd been there every day since
Way
it
to twist
started.
the facts, guys.
He'd never been there, and to the club, and I'd been there every day since it started. So went in, and he saw the excitement, and he said we should start a company. But one of the things we thought of was, well, we could build technology that helps disabled people be more equal, like a blind person equal to a sighted person. And look how much we've succeeded. Everywhere you go, look at the sidewalk, and people are walking around blind, bumping into things. So we made the blind and the sighted more equal.
You made the blind and the sighted equal, yes. But so that's interesting. And also, you mentioned the education piece, and I can't help but think that the idea that you had for education, yes, there's a bit of that implemented today, but it's not to the capacity that I think it can be implemented in terms of updating our educational systems to kind of match the speed in which the technology can actually assist.
Yeah, well,
do you
you know,
think?
a whole culture like of a country, and education generally comes from governments, and it's just hard to change fast. Culture changes very, very slowly. I thought that once we had computers in the schools, we were going to turn out so many brainiac kids. We're going to raise the intelligence level, and it didn't happen that way. I thought this computer's so smart. The trouble is, a computer's not like a human being
Yes.
that you really relate to and trust as a smart student.
Yeah.
As a smart teacher, I mean. Because a teacher that could go with you through life, teach you, you're interested. Let's say you're interested in chemistry at 8 years old. And you could learn all through college chemistry in 2 years if you had a brilliant teacher that knew it all and was
Absolutely.
your best friend and knew exactly how to talk to you and what jokes you liked and when you like a break and just sort of knew you as a person. And we haven't gotten to that level yet. We don't really have computers that have the brain of a human.
Do you think we're heading in that trajectory?
No, we're trying to.
Yeah.
We're trying to. So you could never say it'll never happen. Will a computer be equal to the human brain? It's so different right now. I graduated college. 10 years later, I went back to college under a fake name. My Berkeley,
Really?
my Berkeley diploma says Rocky Raccoon Clark.
No, you're joking.
That's who I was. I was
Rocky Raccoon.
Clark. We typed it in the computer
Nice.
at Berkeley.
Nice.
Clark, Rocky Raccoon Clark.
Okay.
And
Why is that?
why is that? Because some people don't want their name known. My name was famous, but not my face yet.
Okay.
Because of Apple. This
Okay.
was after post-Apple success. And I'd had a plane crash and decided this is my chance to go back to college and get my final year done. Mm-hmm. So I was Rocky Raccoon Clark, and I went back as a psychology major, taking
Wow.
all the courses that psychology major students are allowed to take. I wanted to study more about the brain and memory and all that, and learned a lot. We don't know how it's done. We keep trying to make a
Right.
brain, and I was at a company where the engineers figured out how to make a brain.
Wow. That's true.
Takes
That's true.
9 months.
So I wanted to double click a little bit. You mentioned the plane crash.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the plane crash happened while you were working on the Macintosh.
Yes, I was on the Macintosh
You were
team.
on the Macintosh team.
February 7, 1981.
So how did you handle, within yourself, how were you able to self-regulate your emotions and your expectations of yourself at that time when it took you 2 years, I believe, to come back, right?
Well,
and
to
they had
come
made
back,
progress already.
Remember, I went to school for a year, and then I put on a huge music festival that changed the world. The first time ever two-way video between the United States and the USSR during the Cold War. First time ever a big screen was at
Wow.
a concert in the United States, largest stage ever. I mean, that was a huge project.
So that was during the
And
time
my
that
year of
you
school.
were after
the plane crash, I was for 5 weeks. I didn't know any time was passing. Nobody recognized it in me. I had a thing called anterograde amnesia. I
Okay.
don't know that. I can't remember something 5 minutes later.
Wow.
But they didn't notice it. The doctors didn't. And yet it's kind of common in
How
plane
did they
crashes.
not notice it?
Don't ask me. I had the wrong doctors around, because it's common after car crashes and plane crashes if you have lesions near the hippocampus.
Okay.
So anyway, I studied that later. After 5 weeks, I started coming out of it one day, and I talked myself out of it with logic. And half my brain was forming memories, half of it wasn't.
That's insane.
And then I called up Steve Jobs almost right away and said, I've been away from Macintosh for 5 weeks. The team is great. They're my favorite people in Apple. And this is my last chance to go back to college.
Okay, so it was a decision that you made at the time. It wasn't that you had a medical reason for staying
That's
back.
correct. That's right.
Okay.
No.
So you took that sabbatical, I would say.
Whatever you want to call it.
Whatever.
I've never been off, by the way, I've never been off the Apple payroll.
Okay.
From the day we
How
started
does
the
that
company
work?
till today.
I heard that. How does that work?
How does that work? So I get a small token paycheck.
Okay.
I guess they like me, and
I guess.
Appreciate me. I'm
As
loyal.
the mind behind the...
I've always been loyal to Apple, but I will also criticize things I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm just that truthful. So I don't know. I'm very proud of it.
What would you say is one aspect that you've criticized that didn't go down so well?
Oh, I don't know. A bunch of being closed versus open, different ways.
Yeah.
Getting down to specifics. Why do we force you to only talk to Apple user people on our iMessage system, our texting system?
Yes.
And a bunch of others like that.
So
I'm more into sharing and cooperation. Yeah. My festival, the music festival, I sold 1 million tickets over 2 years.
Wow.
That festival was all about, it was called the Us Festival, all of us. It was work together, not conflict with others and fight with others, and
it's more on collaboration and cooperation.
Yes, we wrote an education program and distributed it to all
festival.
All 50 states based on that principle of working together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they adopt any of those principles?
Well, they taught it in classes and used it as education. I don't know if it changed the world much, but I hope so.
You did your...
That's how I felt. Yes, I did an awful lot, especially with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And then I did other things with the Soviet Union, not with Soviet Union, with Russia during Perestroika, when the Soviet Union fell apart.
Okay.
I did a lot of contributing computers to schools. I put on the first concert ever in a stadium outside of Moscow.
That's incredible.
I did it all myself with the top American groups and top Soviet groups.
This is while you were studying, completing your degree at the same time, or
no? This
after?
was even after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. I want to talk a little bit about the open versus closed. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think Apple would be where it was today had the policy not shifted towards closed?
I don't know. I don't want to go back and say, oh, if things had been different, it might have been better.
Yeah.
Or it might have been worse, because that's going back and giving you a reason to frown. And my
No.
formula is don't go back, don't frown. It's not worth thinking about. You can't change it.
Yes.
It's what it is. I just might have run things differently. But you know what? I'm not going to take control over others. It's part of my philosophy in life. My personality is I don't want to control others and force them to be my slaves.
Yeah. So what would you say are, that's one thing that I see in you and I admire. What would you say are other characteristics that make you authentic to yourself and that help you bring your best self always?
It's hard to say. I just know who I am. I still have the same internal, core that I developed when I was 18 to 20 years old. The things that I thought you had to do to be a good person. One of them is always be liked. And so I never want to get into conflict with people. I'm very much a pacifist, and and just get along with everyone. So everybody I've ever been around, no enemies.
Against the advice that youth are getting these days. It's not about being liked, it's about being respected. It's not about being liked, it's about going after the things that you want. So I like that you're kind of...
And I've always lived by that to this day, yeah.
And it served you.
Extremely well. I wouldn't trade my life for anyone else's in the world. I wouldn't trade a day of my life. I've just lived it all the way, I don't know, be nice to people.
That's
it's
beautiful.
A big thing.
Tell me a little bit about your earlier memories with your parents at home. You mentioned that they
Yeah.
were very supportive, but if we could go back to the beginning, what was your household like?
Household like, my father worked as an engineer at a company working for the United States government during the space race and making early missiles. He could never talk about what he was doing. I have no idea. I have no idea one project he was ever on. He followed the rules and stayed silent. You're not allowed to talk about what you're working on at that company. And my mother was a housewife back then. Back then in Silicon Valley, one person who had a normal job, just maybe delivering laundry for a laundromat, could own a home and a car and have all the food and clothing and children and vacations.
It's a different world.
All
than
they
we live
wanted.
in
Now you have to have two people with very high income, stressful jobs to barely have a home. And so, you go back in your life, and I think a lot of people are like me. You remember a lot of good things when you were young. It was all orchards. Silicon Valley was no companies, no houses. It was orchards of fruit trees all the way to the mountains. And, it goes away. You don't get it back.
Yeah.
But you want it, maybe.
Did you spend time outdoors in those orchids?
Oh, did I? Totally. I had no other choice. I had to ride my bike just to go to elementary school. I had to ride through orchards.
That's an incredibly different world than the one that we live in right now, yeah?
Yes, and everything worked so well, but this was before it was called Silicon Valley. Before, I got to live through the start of transistors. That's the heart of the digital world. Your iPhone has a chip in it with 60 billion transistors on one little chip that costs, maybe $1 to make it the most. But back then it was one transistor. That's where it started, and Moore's Law took us up and up and up. We never knew where it would end. But I got to live through going from vacuum tubes. Old radios and televisions had vacuum tubes, and I knew all the formulas. I built my ham radio.
What do you mean vacuum tubes?
They were they had a filament that got really hot and heated off electrons, and electrons flowed through plates, and the voltages on those plates directed them, and that's how radios were made. That's how televisions were made. Everything had to work on vacuum tubes, even some early computers, but they were so unreliable. They got so hot and they'd burn out, quickly. So then we moved to the little tiny transistors, lightweight transistor, and it was developed on the East Coast, but one of the founders moved to Mountain View, California in Silicon Valley. That's why it became eventually...
That's how it started.
He started trying to make transistors, and he couldn't make what he was trying, but the 8 engineers left. They're called the Tutorius 8. They started another company, Fairchild, and Fairchild made transistors, and then other companies spun out and started making transistors, and then they came up with chips. And I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. My father took me to a show in San Francisco, WestCon show, and a guy held up a piece of cardboard with a bunch of things that looked like the tops of buildings on a map, and it had streets between them. He said, "This is a chip we're going to make with 6 transistors on one chip."
Wow!
And it used a process like making transistors, 6 at once. And I went home and I asked my dad, I said, "We're going to have better 6 transistor radios." That was the gadget of my life. And he said, "No, new technologies cost a lot of money. Only the military and the government can afford them." Oh, I wanted it for the average.
Your hands on
I wanted it like appliances. Like we have
Yes.
dishwashers. They used to have to wash dishes by hand. They were probably just as happy, to tell you the truth. But I wanted to make appliances for normal people, and I'd hoped that's where it would go. And it's kind of odd because eventually my personal computers wound up in that category.
That's
appliances
incredible.
for normal people.
I mean, from 10 years old, visualizing that, trying to say, I want to make it accessible for everybody, for the layman person in their house.
I didn't think that at 10 years old, but I knew how to do it.
Okay.
I at least knew how to do it. And
You wanted to do it.
I increased that knowledge, especially when I was 13 years old, and even more when I was 16 years old. And I could design entire computers, and I built one once. Somebody gave me the parts. I had no money. I could never afford a single chip. And an executive in a company got me all these chips, and I built a computer of mine. But it was like the starting how computers were back then. A switch, up is 1, down is 0. And you have 8 switches, 1 1 0 0 1 1 1 0. And then you push a button, and it goes into memory. or it goes into the location, or it sets the memory, and and you type some another number, 100011, and you push that into memory. And then you have a program in memory eventually of ones and zeros, and you could run it. I built that machine, but that's what everybody was trying to build in 1975 when
That's
I was
what you were
5
saying,
years.
5 years ahead of you.
5 years.
5 years
I was 5 years past
after
that,
you.
and I was working for Hewlett-Packard, making the hottest product in the world at the time. The handheld scientific calculators that every engineer, every scientist would have to own, cost $400, and slide rules were $10. Within 5 years, no more slide rules going to be sold.
Wow.
Engineers had to have these calculators, and the calculator, if you push a 5, what happens? You get a 5 in the display. Human. These make sense to humans, not switches 1100. And so, and that was what I was showing off at the Homebrew Computer Club. And whoa, every computer before that had switches and lights on the front panel. Every computer after that one, which didn't have a name yet, would have a keyboard and a video display.
Wow.
That was a huge change.
How did you feel?
But that was just,
Doing
and
that.
that was just, that wasn't even designed as a computer. I had originally built a terminal that could talk to faraway computers over a thing called the ARPANET. There were 6 universities that had computers on the ARPANET. Now it's the internet. Billions.
Wow.
Billions. It was that early a start, but I had to type to it. I could type to a computer across the country, and it could type back to my TV
What was
set.
your, if you can go back to that moment, how did you feel when the response came back to you?
The response of what?
Of the communication on computer to campuses in different places.
How did I feel? It was just amazing. You could decide which university you wanted to connect to, and then you could log in as a guest, because I didn't have accounts. And as a guest, you could run some programs and read some files, learn more about computers even. This was just exhilarating, showing it off. Steve Jobs always turned my stuff into money. He found a way to sell sell it as a terminal. But I modified that by adding my own microprocessor, which is like a brain, and the proper kind of memory. Everyone else was using the wrong type. There were technical reasons for that. I used the right kind of memory, which is the major cost of a computer back then. And now I could take it down to the Homebrew Computer Club and show it off. But it was, it started out as a terminal to talk to faraway computers.
Yes.
I just built a computer onto it. It wasn't designed as a Wozniak computer from the ground up. That was the Apple II.
Okay.
The Apple II, I actually decided color is so important. Color television, the inside circuits were not designed putting out the signals that computers need or memory needs. They're putting out the signals color TV needs. And from that, I derived the signals for the computer. And from that, I did. The Apple II was the first, that was just color, shocked the world.
And look at the color and the HD that we have right now on every device that we own. And I wonder, did you ever think that technology would have the social impact that it does today? Did you see that trajectory as you were working on these different...
It didn't drive me, but it motivated me, inspired me. We had, in our Homebrew Computer Club, I never once spoke. I was too shy. We had Stanford professors and Berkeley professors. They were talking about how society was going to be changed once we had our own computers. And this was a whole group of people that believed in it. Then that encouraged me to design my own pretty quickly, take it down and show it off every 2 weeks at the club met. And it was a motivation. I believed in it, and here are a lot of other people that believe in it like me. And I felt I was kind of important, but I would never quit my job at Hewlett-Packard. I had decided I would be an engineer for life at Hewlett-Packard, who made products for engineers back then. Different. Today they make products for people. Back then only for engineers. And I would never risk that job. I would never move into management because I was anti-political. I was non-political. I would never vote. I decided that when I was 18, 20 years old. I'll never vote. And you get into politics if you're high up in a company. So I decided I'm going to do what I love to do: design hardware, design software. And I wouldn't risk my job. So
I've worked in human capital for some time, and you can always tell. And I worked with engineers, but in oil and gas, and they've the people who are really passionate about engineering never want to go into management and don't want to get into politics. And I find it beautiful in knowing that about yourself and staying true to that as well. It's a
that was
beautiful
100%. As a matter of fact, when my Apple II was so good a design, Steve Jobs found a third partner who was willing to put in money enough to make 1,000 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Steve and I had 0 bank accounts. We were just dirt poor, young 20s, and the guy offered us big money, and I said no at first. He said I had to leave Hewlett-Packard. I said, I'm not going to leave Hewlett-Packard. I don't care.
Yeah.
I turned down the big money.
Wow.
And then eventually a friend convinced me I could start Apple and I could stay an engineer. I didn't have to run a company.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to, okay, we'll start
Incredible.
Apple.
Incredible. Well, if I could ask you, what is one thing that you would tell youth today that will help them in their journey through technology or whatever you view as success?
Probably,
what would you tell them?
Yeah, everybody might have different views of what success is for them, but the more time you put into something, the more work, the better you're going to be. In my math classes in high school, they would assign us do the odd problems from 1 to 37. Mm-hmm. Oh no, I would do every single problem all the way to 50. I would do them all, just putting extra work in. It was something you love. If you love it, you do it for that, and you don't do it for money. I designed a lot of products for people around California while I worked at Hewlett-Packard as an engineer. I would design products for people because I loved my design abilities, and I would always charge them 5 cents. The first hotel movie system ever for a guy in Hollywood, 5 cents. That's all he had to
Wow.
pay. I designed early SMPTE codes for television stations and developed the hardware that did them at 5 cents. That's
incredible.
Yeah, and sometimes I would type term papers in college for people. I loved typing so much. That was back when you had to type. You'd have it handwritten, and you'd have to type it all in. I type it from midnight till 6 in the morning.
That's crazy.
5 cents. Sometimes
My
I
daughter
tutored.
now-
I tutored, and my subjects got A's. 5 cents each tutoring
That's
session.
insane. My daughter now, speaking of typing, my daughter just looks at, she uses an iPad for school. So it just gives her the rest of the, even for spelling, it gives her the rest of the spelling of how the word. She just clicks on it. I'm like, hey, that's cheating.
The trouble is you can't give up these
Yeah.
things. They help you. We have a calculator. We used to only have our heads.
Yes.
And pencil and paper, and now we have a calculator. The Siri, what is 7 plus 2?
Exactly. So if I could, if we could end off the discussion with you telling me a little bit about what you think is the next big thing. What should youth be investing their time, their money, their efforts towards?
Probably towards, I don't know. AI is like the hype of today.
Yes.
Everybody has to say something has AI in it, a little bit like ChatGPT, the
Yes.
large language models. And it's hard to say, how do we, it's not creative. You have to realize
Yes.
it could be hallucinating, giving you bad information. It's not true.
Mm-hmm.
How do you judge? You can't. Same as a person. The trouble is it's too representative of a person. It's being used by bad people. I hate spam. I hate that people are trying to get your passwords, and sometimes they steal people's entire life savings.
And there's a certain bias as well in terms of the content that you're getting from AI, I would say. It's not inclusive of different perspectives completely.
And we're trying to modify it to make it avoid some real bad problem areas, and trying to be bad for children. Trying to modify it, but trying to modify it is, it's sad because that's giving it a bias.
Yeah.
And it should come out, well enough. There should be a way to tell AI to only be good. You can't tell it that.
Yeah.
Sorry, it doesn't have a human brain.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where you think youth should be focusing a little bit more on AI, maybe in terms of AI policy,
No. Look at yourself and focus on whatever you believe in. It could be simply hooking up a few little parts with a soldering iron and making things that flash lights. It could be anything in life.
Love that.
Yeah, go where you want to go, and if you want to build furniture on your own. Work on it. Number of hours adds up. It doesn't have to be technology. Just anything that makes life better.
That's incredible. I love that, and I think that's a beautiful place to end. Thank you so much, Steve, for the conversation. I really enjoyed my time with you.
Thank you. I'm always delighted to have such good questions.
Thank you.
Could go for hours in different directions.
Yeah, I know.